with Lauren Daniels, GPC. I'm Lauren Daniels, GPC. I'm a consultant with my own company, and I am the board liaison to the Mentoring Task Force. And thank you all for being a part of the presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to provide mentor support to all of you willing to take on the important mantle of mentoring. The article, Learning from Experience, Initial Findings of a Mentoring Induction Programs for Novice Principals and Superintendents, identifies that mentoring is a practice that involves facilitation in support of professional learning. The Mentoring Task Force has chosen reflective questioning as a mentor training tool after reviewing several resources as we were designing the GPA mentoring program. Some reflective questioning sources are listed near the end of the presentation, and we encourage you to read further on the subject as you develop your skills as a mentor. So what is reflective questioning? There are various definitions, but for today's purpose, we will use reflective questioning is a technique in which one person prepares and asks questions that are designed to provide opportunities for the respondent to explore his or her knowledge, skills, experience, attitudes, beliefs, and values. You can see the goal is to provide mentor support, as I just mentioned. And that leads to the outcomes that we want to achieve as part of this training webinar and that you want to witness during your mentor experience. Mentors will add the reflective questioning it should be tool here as part of the interaction with your mentee. And utilizing the technique will broaden and deepen the mentee's understanding with respect to self, work roles, and or performance. Why incorporate reflective questioning? Well, because it is a key component of effective mentoring programs that provide an opportunity of professional reflection and introspection. Asking reflective questions allows the mentor to initiate conversations that encourage critical thinking and prompt the beginner to explore his or her ideas and make sense of them. So, as stated, it is intended to encourage personalized thinking. It is not intended to direct the respondent to a conclusion predetermined by the questionnaire. For questioning to be truly reflective, the questionnaire, you, the mentor, must respect the respondent's, mentee's statements. You need to suspend judgment and avoid any attempt to manipulate his or her thinking. So how do we do it? Well, we begin to, these are some tools you can use. Base questions on the respondent's own experiences. For questions to encourage respondents to reflect, they must make sense to the person. When people reflect, they are exploring their own experiences. So questions need to be anchored in the experiences if they are to be perceived as authentic. Reflective questioning means that you take some information you gathered previously and use it in a question. For example, and this is not a grant question, but just to give you an illustration. As you were talking to your customer earlier and asking questions, he said that he wanted to make sure his new jacket was good quality. So you say, you mentioned earlier that you wanted a good quality jacket. Are you intending to wear it a lot? So reflective questions can work well because they show that you have been listening and help you focus on determining the exact needs of, in this case, the customer. Second, word questions in neutral, non-judgmental ways. Questions should avoid implying that the questioner has the correct answer, expects an appropriate response, or is engaged in assessment or evaluation. For example, avoid using phrases such as, "Why didn't you?" Don't you think that? Or weren't you really trying to? So keep overall purpose in mind. Reflective questions can assist during the early stages of forming a professional relationship and later as part of self-assessment and in planning future actions. There is no single right purpose for reflective questions. However, to be useful to participants, the exchange should have some purpose about which the participants are in accord. And we will see how this is applied as we go through some STEM questions in the next slides. Finally, be prepared to follow up initial questions. The initial question may open the door to reflection, but the process will not be sustained unless the questioner is prepared to go the next step. This means having follow-up questions in mind and adjusting the succeeding questions in response to what the respondent is saying. Reflective question can be compared to a dance in which the questioner both leads and follows. While he or she has a purpose in mind and a sense of where the dialogue may go, the questioner also follows the respondent's direction and takes cues about follow-up questions based on what is said. And you can see how this involves a lot of different types of dances, but it's all dance. And that's the way that you will use reflective questioning. It is a technique that you can use it in many circumstances. Once we learn about questions, we need to understand how to ask them. Therefore, not what, but how. First, use a neutral tone of voice. Intonation and body language need to be congruent with the non-judgmental words to deliver a supportive message. A phrase such as, "Can you explain what you mean by that?" becomes highly charged if the emphasis is placed on the word explain, mean, or that. This caution is especially important if you are meeting by phone. And by all means, don't use caps in email questions. And remember that one's posture can show aggression if you are meeting in person. Actually, your posture while on the phone can affect your tone. So pay attention to yourself. Second, incorporate active listening skills. Now, active listening is covered in detail in another webinar, but it includes visual clues such as eye contact and nodding when you meet person to person. Otherwise, its non-visual clues could be sounds that signal the respondent to continue, such as uh-huh or mm-hmm. As a questioner, do not be so eager. In other words, lay back a little bit. Third, critically important, refrain from giving advice. Your role as mentor is defined best through leading and encouraging rather than through advising. Next, we are going to go through some question stems that will help you frame or create your reflective questions. Now, these stems, I've got them broken into individual slides here, but there will be a resource in the Grant Zone community that has a sheet. It's about actually a page and a half that will have these stems on them. Okay, so here we go. So paraphrasing. What are some good lead-ins to paraphrasing? So let me make sure that I understand. In other words, it sounds like, and you can see how these stems can lead you in so many directions. So you know, it's almost like you get stuck. You just say so, or help me understand more about that. It really helps you both. So now we're looking at clarifying. Can you tell me more about? Tell me what you mean by. Could you give me an example? How is that different from? What now we're looking at interpretation. What are some questions that lead you to interpretation? What you are describing could mean, could it be that what you are saying is? Is it possible that? So then meditational, let's move on to what that is. Some things you could get out of that to help you as you work with your mentee. What criteria do you use to? What might happen if? How would it look? What is the impact of whatever on, in this case, it'd be students, it could be your company, it could be the organization, the participants, the clients, whatever you have here. And then how do you decide? To look at instructional questions, it says, would you like more information to review some options or some resources? This kind of question puts the mentee in charge instead of you giving the advice. It helps you understand more the actual resource they might need and the help they might need, and then they can give you permission to help them. Then another thing you can ask is, a couple of things to keep in mind are, again, you're giving some of your knowledge, but you want to be gentle about it. And then again, some of your own knowledge. Again, research seems to indicate. And then sometimes it is helpful if. And if you took part in the introduction of mentoring, you know that mentoring is not necessarily training. But when you do this type of professional mentoring, there's an element of coaching in there. And we sometimes will lead people to some kind of instruction. So it's not something we can just leave out. And then in summarizing, we're looking at, you have stated that your goal is. Let's review the key points in our discussion. Tell me your next steps. And then that will help you with, how you can set up your next meeting. So this is your homework. So all of those will help you lead you through your various meetings with your mentee. Now, transformational would make more sense to you if you read content from the book Blended Coaching. But the premise of this coaching mentoring model is that the relationship process leads the mentee in a different way of being rather than a different way of acting. And that's what we learned as we were reviewing the materials, is that we want the mentees to grow professionally. So transformational, you want to see if they can apply what they've really been learning through the experience and the relationship. And so these are some of the questions that you could use. Let's try a role play. Ground that assessment for me. Could you make a different assessment? Or what new way of being are you willing to try out? And I can give you an example here. As I told you, I was as a consultant, I belonged to a consulting group, and it's all consultants of different types. But we had some younger consultants there, and they were really experiencing some trouble with the client not being, not paying attention to them, or they didn't feel they paid attention. And we just talked about how, when you're a consultant, then you have to know that you're the consultant, and that's your role. You're not an employee, and it's a different mindset, and so you have to put forth that you're providing expert opinion, and it's a different state of being. And so as we discussed that, and we went through some role playing and some things like that, they were able to see that what I was saying, it's not that you're being bossy or anything like that. It's just that you are being paid as a professional, and you need to kind of act that way. So that's how you can use some of that summarizing. Now, this content sources, these are some things that I used to pull together this particular presentation, but the entire group used the blended coaching skill as we really created the framework for the GPA program. So this again, the first two are really good articles, and then the third is a book. It's not very expensive. I think it was like $15, $16 from Amazon. So that brings us to any questions. Now, since this is a recorded webinar, it's going to be we can't take your questions, but we have the Grant Zone community for the mentees and the mentors, and so we want you to put any questions you have out into that community, and then I can answer them, or anybody on the committee can answer your questions. And that's it. That's all for now. And if there's anything you feel we missed, please let us know in that grant community. Or that grant community, excuse me, the mentor community. Right, thank you. That's all.